I'm Jeremy Hickerson, and this is All of Life. This is a reading from my literary memoir, Now, Then, and Then, Part 4 of the chapter titled A New Place. It was almost time for my trip. I would leave the next morning. The flight departed from Portland Airport at 8 a.m. The dogs had escaped again the night before, when I let them out to pee. In the dark, I couldn't see exactly how they did it, but they had gotten out at the back corner of the yard where the side fence met the back fence. I had to go into the neighbor's yard to get them. I tried not to make too much noise and hoped the neighbor wouldn't think I was an intruder. The next morning, I wired the two fences together before going back to work. Once again, I drove home at morning break and checked on them. They were still in the yard. When I came home that night, they hadn't gotten out. As I fell asleep, thinking about my trip the next day, I hoped I had taken care of the problem. The next morning, I got up at 6 a.m. I had packed the night before, so I didn't have much to do except get dressed and feed the dogs. After they ate, they disappeared through the dog door into the backyard. I had breakfast and drank my coffee, then went out to say goodbye to them. Larry would pick me up in 15 minutes. "Here, George, here, Reggie," I called. George ran up, but not Reggie. I walked to the back of the yard and called again. I heard a rustle in the bushes beyond the back fence. Then he appeared and squeezed under it. He had dug under the chicken wire, beginning at the edge, which was 3 feet back from the fence. I didn't think he would figure this out so soon, but he had. Larry would be here any minute. My flight left at 8. What could I do? I got the shovel from the garage, filled the hole, hammered in a few extra stakes at the edge of the chicken wire, then rolled the lawnmower out of the shed and positioned it on top of the spot where Reggie had been digging. That would have to be good enough. I went back inside and the dogs followed me. The doorbell rang. It was Larry. "Hi," I said. "I sure appreciate the ride." "No problem," he said. George and Reggie sniffed at him. "Let me take care of the dogs." I called them and started walking toward the back porch. They didn't follow. They were more interested in Larry. I called out, "Treat," and they came running. I led them to the back porch, gave them each a milk bone, and closed the door. Larry watched us through the window. Both dogs went out the dog door into the backyard. "That's nice," Larry said. "They can go in and out." "Yes," I said, thinking about the lawnmower over the dug-up spot. There was no reason they couldn't dig in a different place. I put that thought out of my mind. After Larry dropped me off at the airport and I had boarded the plane, my spirits were high. My last plane trip was freshman year of college when I flew back to Chicago after coming home for Christmas. The flight to Virginia was not direct. I had a layover for a couple hours in Chicago. I found my way through O'Hare to the terminal for the connecting flight, then walked back to the airport restaurant and got lunch since I had time to kill. After lunch, I went back to the terminal and read the newspaper. Finally, it was time to board. As soon as we had taken off and were in the air, the pilot made an announcement about bad weather on our route. He said we would still make it to Roanoke on schedule. After we'd been in the air for an hour, he told us to fasten our seatbelts. We were going to hit some turbulence. It was bumpy for the next 10 minutes. From time to time, the pilot apologized for the uncomfortable ride, always in that confident, all-is-routine pilot voice, which seems guaranteed to reassure. Then it got really bumpy, and several times the plane dropped abruptly and recovered. This extremely rough ride lasted for 20 minutes, and now we weren't hearing anything from the cockpit. Finally, things settled down, and the pilot came on the speaker. "I'm sorry for the uncomfortable ride, folks. We got caught in the middle of a thunderstorm, and it was a bit rough there, but we're out of it now. Unfortunately, we're 20 minutes late, behind schedule for Roanoke." 30 minutes later, he spoke again. "Folks, there's bad weather at the Roanoke field, but we've been cleared for approach. We'll see what it looks like. Our fallback is Charlottesville." The fasten seatbelt sign came on and the plane began to descend. I saw the Virginia countryside far below. Then there was nothing but fog. Suddenly, snowflakes swirled close to the window. The plane slowed. We had to be getting close. All at once the fog cleared and the runway was visible. But in the fog we had lost our way and were flying at almost right angles to it, a startling sight. The engines roared to life and we climbed rapidly for 30 seconds. "Sorry about that, folks," the pilot said. "We're going to have to divert to Charlottesville. Don't worry. We'll get you to your destination. I apologize for the inconvenience, but as you can see, the conditions were against us." A half hour later, he told us the airline would drive us from Charlottesville back to the Roanoke Airport or to our hotels in the Roanoke area. We landed in Charlottesville and I boarded a van with 15 other passengers. The drive to the hotel in Blacksburg took over 2 hours. It was just getting dark when we began the trip. We traveled through a hardwood forest for a while. The window in the van was cracked open and you could smell the cool, woodsy air. In the darkness of the van, with the wild night just outside, it was as if we had entered another world, yet we remained safe in our cocoon. When we arrived at the fairly classy Best Western, I checked in, went to my room and unpacked, then got dinner at the hotel restaurant. I went back to the room and watched TV for a couple of hours, then masturbated and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up an hour before the clock radio alarm, which I had set for 7 a.m. I turned on the radio and listened to NPR News for half an hour, then got up. After breakfast at the hotel restaurant, I still had 30 minutes before the shuttle left for the university. I thought about my dogs. I hoped they were doing okay all by themselves. Maybe Dad would play with them when he came over. Since I had some time, I went outside and walked down the street a few blocks. The temperature was cool, perhaps 45 degrees, but I had my coat on. All around me were the East Coast trees in their fall glory, brilliant oranges, reds, browns, and yellows. I stood on the corner and watched cars and people pass by, feeling hopeful, like everything was new and anything could happen. For some reason, Dad had made a point of telling me to keep my eyes open for any girls I might meet on this trip. Maybe he was on to something. It was possible. With 10 minutes to spare, I walked back to the hotel and rode the shuttle to Virginia Tech. Once on campus, I consulted a map and found the building where the class met. When I walked into the classroom, there were about 20 people sitting at the tables, which were arranged in rows. There was a lab sink at the front of the room and nozzles for Bunsen burners here and there. Dr. McNair sat in the front, facing us. After a few minutes, he stood up and introduced himself. He talked a little about his early career, then quickly went over the course outline for the week. His manner was friendly and brisk. After 40 minutes of lecture and slides covering the fundamentals of chromatography, he took questions, then dismissed us to a lab session. The lecture had improved my basic understanding of the theory, but I was looking forward to the hands-on part. Then I saw the lab instructor. It was her eyes that got you. You expected blue with the blonde hair, but they were brown. Her knitted wool sweater gave her an offbeat look that I liked, sort of the opposite of the formal scientist. She was pretty and wore it easily. I would turn 29 in a month. She might be mid-20s, maybe a little younger. She stood at the front of the room and addressed us. "Hi, I'm Cindy, one of Dr. McNair's grad students. This morning we're going to investigate polarity effects, the way the chemical composition of the column interacts with the organic compounds we're trying to separate." She went through the lab instructions, then told us to break into groups. "After you're done, discuss the results in your group and try to explain what happened," she said. We divided up around the 4 GCs. I decided to hang back and let someone else inject the sample. No need to risk making a fool of myself. Another guy in our group stepped up. "Okay," he said, "we'd better get started. I guess I'll do it." I gave him points for not acting like a know-it-all. He stuck the syringe in the sample vial, drew out 1 microliter, injected it into the GC, then looked around for the button to start the run. He didn't find it right away, so I pointed it out to him. We had the same instrument in our lab. Then we all watched the graph that appeared on the tape as it unrolled from the printer and speculated on the identity of the peaks. When the run had finished, we discussed it and labeled the components as best we could. Cindy had each group explain their results, then took questions. I asked about the competing effects of sample polarity and carbon chain size. Cindy seemed impressed. "Good questions," she said, nodding. A few minutes later, she came over to check on our group. I asked her if the components themselves could have an effect by attracting or repelling their neighboring components. "You really think about things a lot," she said. She stood just a few feet from me. I felt warmth in my stomach and tried not to blush. After the lab, we had lunch, then another lecture. Dr. McNair had scheduled a hike in the afternoon for those who were interested. We hiked up to a viewpoint where you could look down on the fall colors in the forest all around. It was spectacular. On the way back, Cindy made her way towards me on the trail until we were walking together. "That was a good question you asked in the lab," she said. "Thanks," I said, trying to act natural and not show my surprise that she was talking to me. For all she knew, I was an old hand at this. I prayed I wouldn't give myself away for the novice I was. "How long have you been a grad student?" "This is my first year. I'm younger than Dr. McNair's other students, and I'm only going for my master's degree instead of a PhD. "Do you think you might go on and get a doctorate?" "I don't know. I'm not sure how much I really like the work. How about you? Have you done graduate work?" "No," I said, wishing mightily that I could say yes, wishing I had some kind of academic credential to elevate me above the pack, at least a little. "I just have a bachelor's degree." "That's okay. It's not all it's cracked up to be. You think deeply. That's what's important." Again, I tried not to blush. Was she hitting on me? Any thoughts of the practical, the mundane, of back home and how my dogs were doing, for instance, were now pushed far to the back of my mind and would remain there for the rest of the week. My only thought now was, can this really be happening? We continued our conversation until we arrived back at the university. "Are you coming to the dinner tonight?" she asked. They were putting on a special dinner at the university cafeteria. I had planned on skipping it and eating at the hotel. "I don't know." "Well, the food's great, and it's a good time to get to know us," she said. "Okay, I'll see you there." Thanks for watching. If you like this, please click like, click subscribe if you want. It helps my channel, and I'll see you next time.